to the meeting this morning, so welcome to this morning's executive. I think we have just about everyone here this morning, and it's gone 10 o'clock. Do we have any apologies?
No, Convener, there are no apologies submitted.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest, financial or non-financial, by any member? No, thank you. We move into the first part of agenda, and it's the minute of the meeting held on the 11th of May, pages 4 to 9. Are we happy to agree that as a true record?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Is there any particular matter that's not mentioned elsewhere or in the action log that MD would wish to have brief feedback on? No, okay, thank you. Moving on to the rolling action log. You have that before you. I think everything is fairly up to date with items and either on the agenda or indications of when they're likely to come forward. Is there any questions on the action log? No. Okay, thank you. Our next item is a referral from scrutiny, and it is the coronavirus update. And Kenneth, are you going to speak to this?
Yes, Convener, I will. Morning, everybody, and apologies for taking a few seconds there to get off mute. Yeah, this coronavirus update report was reported to the Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of June and has been referred by that committee to the Executive for your consideration. And initially it was written as a response to the Scrutiny Committee's request for a holistic report on the Council's response to the COVID emergency. And it brings together input from all Council services, the Health and Social Care Partnership, the Trust. There's quite a detailed appendix, which I think gives a sense of both the degree of the challenge faced and the range and scale of activity in terms of our response. It includes links to something very positive and helpful case studies, many of which underline the quality of joint working with partners and with communities during the period of the pandemic. It includes results of some deep dive work relating to specific issues. It highlights lessons learned, and it proposed to the Scrutiny Committee that a further follow-up report be made to that committee at the end of this year, which I think is appropriate given that we are still emerging from the pandemic. Members are very aware of the ongoing issues, and that we should revisit this to focus again on some of the lessons learned and how we move forward, I think is really important. Very grateful to colleagues across the organisation and partners for their contributions to this, to Douglas and Resilience colleagues Miranda Wilson and Emma Graham for bringing it all together. There's a lot in the document because, I mean, as we all know, the COVID-19 has been the dominant feature of the landscape facing the Council and driving our activity over the last year and more. So I don't intend to go into the details, but I do want to say that I think amongst these unprecedented challenges, I think colleagues across the Council, partners, people in our communities have responded exceptionally well in difficult times, but it is really important that we do learn the full lessons from that. The Scrutiny Committee decided that the report should be forwarded to the Executive, though without any additional specific comments in relation to it. So it is for the Executive to note today, and myself and colleagues would of course be happy to deal with any questions or comments that members of the Executive may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. I think it's helpful for members to be able to see this report because it is covering all aspects of our response around the pandemic. And while we have responded well in most areas and unprecedented in some, I think it is useful to be able to look up a wee bit clinically at the response and to look at areas where we look to improve. And indeed, the lessons learned are going to be critical to being able to update our resilience response. And I know there was a deep dive done around that and our risk assessments for the future. I think it's a very positive report on the whole, and it recognises the role of our partners, particularly the third sector and our health and social care partnership, and the unprecedented times and the challenges that they have had in being able to deliver services and sustain people throughout the pandemic. So I'm pleased that we have the opportunity to look at this, but I do appreciate there's a lot of detail within this, and what has come out from that will be used to action the improvements that are required. But I will remind members that it is only for noting, and I'm happy to take a few questions on the report, but I would remind people that we do have a full agenda. Okay, Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. I think there were very many good things that happened during the pandemic in the council, but there were issues too. In the about 12th week, I ended up having to take my computer in and couldn't even get in the front door of the municipal buildings. What was more challenging was that there was a lady there who was looking for a children's panel, and there was nothing to tell her where it was. And this lady turned out to have not seen her child in 12 weeks. And I think that the real challenge for us is that how easy was it for people to contact us? What did we miss and why? And how do our communities rate us? And I don't see that in this report. It's almost like we're marking our own homework, and we should really be asking our communities for their views, because between October and December 2020, something like 10,000 phone calls a month went unanswered on our systems, and people could not get in touch, and each and every one of us as councillors has had difficulty getting in touch with officers. Some areas have been much better than others. So I think we should turn this round and ask our customers and our communities how we did, because there are certainly things we have missed, although there were very many positives too. Thank you.
Apologies, I was on mute. That's the first one of the morning. Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. It is indeed a very positive report, and I'd just like to pay tribute to everybody involved. I mean, it's been a phenomenal achievement over the course of this pandemic. When you read this report, you see all the services that have came together, and certainly the cooperation for our partners has been more than welcome. Sitting on the Community Planning Partnership meeting last week, it's clearly evident there is more joined up thinking than we ever had before, and that was really welcomed. It's as if we've got closer and we're working together, and I'm sure we'll learn from this and develop our risk assessments, and the resilience will be stronger going forward. But positive report. I just want to say, as I say, a personal tribute to everyone involved across the district. Really, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett, and I would agree that there is certainly a better synergies amongst partners. While we maybe had good relationships before, I think we have far more collaborative relationships, and I think what we have done is broken down a lot of the barriers and the bureaucracy and got on with things, and I think that's something that we need to keep going forward. Any other member, any comments? Councillor Reid.
Am I unmuted? Yes, okay. Yes, sorry. Convener, yes, I think I've got to share the views of others in regard to the response. I wonder if I may at this stage ever ask a question about Falkirk High School and if any steps have been taken to mitigate the loss of time that may have been lost to pupils last week.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reid. I'll go to Mr Naylor.
Just to say that the school closed the previous Thursday evening, and plans were immediately put in place to revert to the remote learning activity and learning materials that had been in place at an earlier stage of the year. The reports that I've had is that the outbreak was very carefully managed, and the school returned yesterday. As far as I'm aware, there's been no significant impact, in particular on the evidence gathering and the submission of grades for those involved in SQA examinations. So it's been dealt with as well as could possibly have been done.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
that. I could mention the words deep dive now entering their vocabulary. I think I know what it means, but I would have preferred an English word, to be honest.
And we can look at what language we use, but I think it reflects the getting into the nuts and bolts of things, and looking at things in greater detail. And I think it's right that's that we do that, because that's the only way we actually learn what we can do better.
Well, the last count of the language had 1 million words in it. I think we could have chosen one, but that's for another time.
Yeah, we'll note that, Councillor Reid, and perhaps look at the plain English use. Any other member? Are we content to note the report? Yep.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 6 is the UK Government Levelling Up Fund, Community Renewal Fund and Community Ownership Fund. And I think Douglas is going to take us through this.
Thanks, Convener. So this report gives an update on 3 UK government funds that were announced very recently. We did give notice to this in the recent report to the Executive on the Economic Recovery Plan. And this report gives further detail on the work that's been taking place to prepare for submissions seeking this funding support from the UK government. And the report asks that we note the work that's been taking place, the announcements that have been given, and agree that officers progress opportunities to submit eligible funds, eligible bids for the Levelling Up Fund, with the prospect of submissions to 2 rounds. First round looking to support the Westfield Bridge and associated works on the A904, and also a submission in round 2 for the Avon Gorge and associated works jointly with West Lothian Council. I also ask that we proceed with a submission seeking community renewal funds of up to 3 million in this financial year. I also ask that we note the advance funding provisions that have been made for each of these funds to enable their delivery, and suggest that we bring back a further report on the work that's taking place. The background to these funds is set out in the report and highlights the role that's perceived in statements by the UK government seeking to level up across the UK, in particular to assist communities after the pandemic. And it notes the contribution that support could offer towards assisting local economic growth, helping to regenerate town centres and high streets, helping individuals into employment, improve transport links, invest in culture, and give communities a stronger voice in their prospects, particularly in the management of local assets. So these funds are targeted towards each of those objectives. And the UK government intends to work with local authorities across the area, England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, to understand their local needs and bring forward propositions that will help to address these needs. The three new investment funds are the UK Community Renewal Fund, the Levelling Up Fund, and the Community Ownership Fund. And each of these is related to what's termed a shared prosperity fund that is in development at the present time. And it is expected that that will replace the European structural funds that members may be familiar with, used to operate in our area, and provided quite significant capital funds through the regional development funds and revenue funds through the European Social Fund that has assisted this type of activity in the past. So the intention is that these three new funds will help to shape this approach to the Shared Prosperity Fund as it comes forward. We were approached in April, giving notice of the intention to establish these funds, and that since then we've had further discussions with UK officials about the approach that we should progress with. There is 4 billion announced across the UK, with 800 million anticipated across Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. We estimate of that around 400 million should come forward to Scotland. The funding is targeted towards a number of characteristics, and areas have been assessed on their need for economic recovery and growth, the need for improved transport connectivity, and their need for regeneration. And as a consequence of that assessment, 100 priority places have been identified across the UK, with Falkirk being one. So we are in an advantageous position in being a priority one location for this financial support. The Levelling Up Fund is a capital fund, and it is intended to invest in local infrastructure that will have a visible impact on communities. And the types of schemes expected there would be contributions to transport schemes, urban regeneration, cultural assets, that kind of thing. It is highlighted that MPs should play a part in the consultation and confirmation of bids that should come forward with this. And local authorities can submit one bid for each MP whose constituency lies within their boundary area. And councils can submit at least one bid, and there are a number of rounds that will come forward. We can also develop joint bids with other local authorities, and in the course of this work, we have had engagement with the Forth Valley authorities and also with West Lothian Council, who share a constituency boundary with Lithgow and Falkirk East. The funds are directed, as I say, towards infrastructure projects that require up to £20 million worth of funding. In exceptional cases, they do allow for schemes of between 20 and 50 million. That would be for transport projects, and there is an expectation of significant work being done to support those schemes to give justification for that order of expenditure. Councils can pool funding from across their bids to improve the chance of funding for these large schemes. The proposals need to be submitted by local authorities, and they need to demonstrate their contribution towards the objectives of the scheme, as I've set out, on economic recovery, etc., but also note their contribution towards delivering net zero. The projects are therefore well matched to the Council's own objectives as set out in the investment zone and in our work for the tax incremental financing, the TIF, and that these are projects designed to support transport and regeneration, town centre and cultural based investment. It's a challenging timescale for delivery. We're expected to make submissions if we choose to submit to the first round, and that would need to be submitted by this Friday, 18th of June. We can wait for subsequent rounds, but what we are cognizant of is that the pressure on these funds is likely to increase as the process extends. Bids have to be commit expenditure by March 2024, which is very challenging for this order of capital spend, and they have to be submitted by detail in terms of the capacity for delivery as well as the objectives that they will meet. The assessment process takes into account the characteristics of each place, their deliverability, as I say, that March time, the 24 timescale being important, the strategic fit with local and national priorities, and value for money. They need to have an economic case presented. We would be entitled to one successful bid, so we can make bids at each round, but ultimately we're only allowed to receive one successful bid. There's also capacity funding support for the bids being made. We have looked towards the schemes that we consider are appropriate to progress. We've looked at schemes that we know would be able to deliver in the time frame of March 2024 and considered that 2 bids would be appropriate to progress. One for round 1, which would be the works proposed at the Westfield Bridge and the A904 Westfield Roundabout. And we consider a further bid under the large-scale scheme submission for the Avon Gorge as a possible bid jointly with West Lothian Council. And we understand from them that they're proceeding with a round 1 bid for a skills academy, and they are also supportive of an Avon Gorge submission being progressed under the large schemes for round 2. The bids help with support and support the delivery of the TIF programme, and that was reported back to Emergency Executive in September 2020, where we noted that there were further funds required for the delivery of the full programme, and we have been in discussion with Scottish Government about securing that additional support. Clearly, the TIF has been successful so far in progressing the works at the Junction 6 Earlsgate roundabout and further development arising from that, and in works to enable a number of sites, including the provision of the EV hub at the stadium. So therefore, we feel that the works at the Westfield Bridge would accord well with the overall work that's been taking place on the TIF, and therefore we consider it's important to progress with that one in round 1. That project does have the capacity to spend within the March 2024 timescale, and therefore we feel that should be advanced as soon as possible. We have consulted with the MPs for that proposal, and they are agreeable to that being the submission. In relation to the Community Renewal Fund, that involves 220 million of funds across the UK, with around 3 million allocated to the Falkirk area for expenditure of these revenue funds that would need to be expended by March 2022. Again, we're in the top 100 priority places, and these funds are intended to target work-based training and skills uplift, business growth, digital skills, and capacity building for communities, as well as contributing towards that net zero objective. We've again received guidance on the process for that, and as a consequence uplifted details to the Council's website seeking submissions from various organisations. Public, private and third sector organisations were invited to bid. Large bids were expected. They were not expecting lots of small bids. They were looking at bids of around £500,000 of support to be issued. We received 12 bids from a variety of organisations across the Falkirk area and some national organisations. They totaled 5 million, and we've selected 5 that we propose to take forward, totalling the 3 million as it has been allocated to us. They've been assessed by officers as meeting the objectives of the scheme and best befit the process for delivery by March next year. So therefore, our intention is to submit that to UK Government for approval, and we would expect to hear the announcement of that by end of July. Again, there's £20,000 worth of capacity money for that scheme, and we're suggesting that a claims and compliance officer be appointed to support this. There's a community ownership fund that's been announced, 150 million for communities to take ownership of assets in their area. Bids for up to 250,000, in exceptional cases up to £1 million for these kinds of projects. It's expected that the process for that will roll out at the end of this month, and as soon as we get details, we'll be alerting our community organisations of the that bid being established. And clearly that there's potential benefits in alignment to the Council's work that's taken place through the Strategic Property Review. Each of the projects being pursued needs to evidence the process of consultation that's taken place, engaging a range of partners and stakeholders in the work, and I've noted the connection with and views of MPs for the constituencies in our area. We've also consulted, as I say, with the local authorities. The financial implications are set out in the report, noting the potential for attraction of quite significant funds through each of these schemes, and that they lay a platform for further funds through the Shared Prosperity Scheme as it comes forward. We also note the capacity funding that's been identified as in place. And we do note the risks associated with delivery of these schemes, particularly the risk in meeting the timescales for delivery of the funds, but there's also a risk in not submitting and losing out on the prospect of the attraction of these funds. And for that reason, we've given this work priority and have drawn it together to make, hopefully, we believe, a successful submission. So in conclusion, we feel that these funds offer real benefits in alignment with our own economic recovery plan, with the objectives we'll set out through the TIF and the investment zone initiative. They will help in delivering on the Council's priorities and our community's priorities, as has come through the consultation on the economic recovery work last year. There will be further rounds of funding through the Shared Prosperity Fund, and we feel it's important to demonstrate that we can deliver in regard to these funds, build a track record, and look forward to further rounds of funding in support of our objectives. I'm happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thank you, Douglas, and I just want to put on record my thanks for the huge amount of work that has been done in pulling all of this together in such a short time scale, and trying to get a bid ready to be submitted on this, and the work that's been done, particularly around the Community Renewal Fund, as the timescales have been extremely challenging, and almost challenging that to the point where it was obstructive to be able to deliver on. So while some authorities may well have had the heads up on this, we are having to come from a wee bit behind. But we were always a bit disappointed with the UK's contribution to Falkirk Growth Deal, and 40 million. We didn't feel that the recognition that was given to the national importance of the area. Therefore, having the opportunity to be in the top 100 to be able to bid for the Levelling Up Fund helps towards that. And I think it would be extremely disingenuous of us, to the people of Falkirk, not to take that opportunity to lever in that funding. And I appreciate that while not everybody would want to see this particular project come to the top of the list, it is the one that's shovel ready. It is one that will deliver on our commitment around active travel. It will help towards our net zero. It will free up traffic congestion and at 4 points round a roundabout, and will indeed stimulate our economy as part of our recovery and create jobs. And that is something that is very difficult to reject, and I would be fully supportive of the bid around the Westfield Bridge going forward for that. And I know that following the discussions with MPs, they were very supportive of that, recognising what it would do to stimulate our local economy. I think we're going to have to feel our way through this pilot area around the placement for the EU structural funds and the shared prosperity, and look to use this opportunity to influence how that may look in the past. Compared to the past, as the direct dealing with the UK government is something that's been very different around these structural funds, and adds an extra layer into the discussions, but that is something I think we do have to work with going forward. In regards to the Community Renewal Fund, I think it's very, very positive and pleasing to see that we are oversubscribed, that we have £5 million worth of bids coming forward and to meet that criteria, particularly around skills regeneration and the economic recovery. And while there's only 5 of those bids being recommended for acceptance, being able to direct those that haven't been successful in being put forward to other funding streams, I think is going to be important, and I note that from the paper. That is our intention, to maximise and lever in as much of the funding as possible to give people the best opportunity as part of our recovery programme. I think there's great synergies between what's happening around the community ownership fund, and I know we've not got all the details and the criteria around that, but within our own programme of community choices, and particularly around the capital there, I think there's opportunities to maximise our community empowerment and engaging with our communities and supporting our communities, as we'll see as part of the community renewal part, as around supporting people about taking on community halls, etc. So I think it very much is aligned. It will be challenging to actually deliver on this in the timescales, but we do have a track record of delivering on our TIF. And which is around large infrastructure projects, and I think that is good evidence to say that we're up for this, and we want to be able to make the best opportunities available to the local area and going forward. So I'm happy to move the recommendations in the report, and happy to recommend to members acceptance.
Happy to second. Formally convener.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Alexander, for that. I will open it up now to members. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. This funding is welcome. It's a significant contribution for the UK government to try and regenerate up here. We were going to put in an amendment for 2.12, changing the priority around for Avon Gorge and Westfield Bridge, but it's a joint bid. Avon Gorge is a joint bid with West Lothian, so clearly that's got to go forward. And one of the reasons we were going to suggest that was because there's been a significant amount of deaths at the Avon Gorge and a number of injuries. It's a treacherous place, and we kind of thought that might have been a priority in round 1, but clearly West Lothian are going to put forward a bid in round 2, so it makes sense that we are joined up. So I would just ask that the executive asks that the Avon Gorge is recognised as a priority, and that work is commenced to ensure that the project is best placed to succeed in round 2. So I would just like that to be noted. And I would also just like to say I only received a list of the projects for the Community Renewal Fund last night, and I believe that was after a request from Councillor Reid. I'm not quite sure how the weighting's been done, the criteria to decide. I mean, there's a bid in there for 376,000 for the Community Trust. I'm not quite sure what that is, but I think it might be around the HQ and Arts Centre that isn't even built yet. Where Pocket Rugby Football Club, I discovered on Sunday night they've got a bid in, and it's a fantastic bid. It involves the local children, and it works with FADAM, and so it's a fantastic bid. But nevertheless, the decision's been taken. So I just felt there could have been more engagement with councillors on this, and I understand the urgency to get it through. But I think there's been a lack of communication on it, and councillors could have been engaged in it a bit more. Clearly, it's too late for to change any of this, but I just wanted to highlight that. Nevertheless, happy the money's coming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. Just to say around Avon Gorge, I'm happy to accept everything you've said around that being our next priority. I think one of the issues was it wasn't a shovel-ready project. There's some work that still requires to get done on the design, and that is still a number of months away. And there's a number of other hurdles that we need to be overcome there, particularly as it's a joint bid. So I think the timescales were going to be challenging, are very challenging, to the point that we might not have been successful in getting to that. But certainly both these projects were the ones that rose to the top, and also the fact that West Lothian are in not priority one, we weren't very confident that we would be successful in that one, but certainly in the next round, happy to support that as going forward as being the project that's a priority, and work on the joint bid. And I understand there's a potential that could be coming forward towards the end of the year, so it's not that far away.
Thank you, Convener.
I'll maybe ask Douglas if he could give a wee bit more of a background around the community renewal and any information around the waiting. So I think the information was only circulated to us all last night once the process had been concluded. But maybe a wee bit more detail around that. Douglas?
Yeah, as I've said, this has been dealt with very promptly following the issue of guidance by the UK government. We did send out details on the website for groups to make the submissions. It was a tight turnaround for their work to be submitted to us and for it to be assessed. So it was, the conclusions of that assessment were only done last Friday, and that was pulled together as a basis for making the submissions that we need to by this Friday. It is normal for officers to proceed with this type of bid and then alert members to the outcome of that process. Clearly, in this instance, there are a number of projects that are unsuccessful. The assessment has been based on the criteria that UK government have defined, and there's been a set of scores and formal assessment undertaken by officers to get to that point. Those unsuccessful bids, we're pointing towards other sources of funds that can proceed with their intentions. There will be further rounds of this funding, and we would certainly want to work with those organisations that have proposals in order to see a successful outturn to these from these funds.
Okay, thank you. I've got a number of people now wanting to come in, so I'll take people in the order in which I have picked them up. I've got Councillor Gardner, I've got Councillor Coombs, I've got Councillor Kerr and Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. And this is a bit of a rarity. I agreed with most of what Robert said there, and I too would have liked to have seen Raven Gorge at the top of the list, because it really is a priority for this area. We all know what the problems it causes, and it's a big infrastructure problem that we have there, but it will get resolved. You did touch on it yourself, Convener, and I was going to ask Douglas to put a bit more information in relation to the Westfield Bridge and the net zero objective and how he sees that as achieving that. And the other thing I was going to ask was, I know these two projects are in the east. Going forward for future rounds, I'm assuming we're going to be looking at the full of Falkirk district. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, Douglas, do you want to comment on that?
Yep. I think the big challenge with this fund was having schemes that are shovel ready. So we really need to be able to deliver on schemes that can meet that timescale of March 2024. And the Westfield project is the one that's most advanced. But just to say that is a significant project that will contribute in large terms to achieving the council's economic objectives as well as its net zero objectives, and it's very much at the fulcrum of both of those issues in helping to create jobs and attract investment at a key location around the Falkirk Gateway, close to the stadium, the college and the Helix. And this goes back to the early intent that was established in the TIF to overcome the constraints that junction was offering to investors. There was a Section 75 expectation of contributions towards delivery of that upgrade. Without it, those developments would not be able to proceed. And that impedes the capacity to attract jobs and investment. And so, as we've seen already, and a good example is at Earls Gate, where Earls Gate Park is nearing completion now. It's had the investment through Callachem with the provision of the new Asda distribution centre, the energy from waste plant, the Celtic Renewables scheme, and there's an application coming forward for a new pharmaceuticals plant down there. That employs over 1,300 people, 30 different chemicals companies on that site. So they've been taking the benefit of the TIF, and that removing that junction constraint in Westfield is integral to this and will help to attract that investment. But it also helps in net zero terms in completing a missing link in our capacity for active travel for walking and cycling across the area. The ambition is to create a green network. We have an extensive green network already. We're the best walking neighbourhood in the UK. But if anyone, and I know a number of you will have tried to cross the Westfield roundabout junction on foot, and it's a real hazard and a real obstacle to users trying to get about. And therefore, the intention of the bridge is to create that new infrastructure that will encourage pedestrians, encourage cyclists, and moving across each of those sites and between Falkirk and Grangemouth. So it really is a significant addition to the complement of infrastructure that will help our area promote net zero, and it's for that reason we're keen to advance it.
Okay, thank you, Douglas.
Thanks for that, Douglas. And yeah, I do agree there's a couple of missing links, connecting communities and connecting council areas, which I'm sure we can work on going forward.
Just to come back to the point you make about other parts of the council area, Councillor Garner, because I neglected to answer on that. Yeah, I mean, the point about the schemes that we have that are shovel ready is that they are focused in that area that's been given attention. Grangemouth, and Falkirk, that has been a real focus of this effort. But there are further rounds of this scheme coming forward. The Shared Prosperity Fund will offer further rounds where we can look to attract support. And we need to make that business case. So when it comes to schemes that are being advanced in the west of the area, I'm thinking the likes of the Bonnie Bridge rail halt, that needs a very strong and powerful business case to be put together. That work has been happening, but it is the kind of project that if we can give a convincing case around in economic terms and in net zero terms, then it could be the proposition that could be advanced for these funds. And we will be looking at further opportunities in the West for that as a means to see their delivery.
Thanks, Douglas. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, convener. Sorry, I didn't realise I was next in the queue. A couple of points and the questions for Douglas. Douglas, you said that we were in an advantageous position to be a priority in the Levelling Up Fund. I'm not sure I would use that phrase. I don't think it's a great advantage to say that we are in great need. Any funding that our communities is welcome. However, it would be a whole lot nicer if both governments actually properly funded council services and communities so that we got the money that we needed and were able to do what we felt was a priority, rather than, it seems like, to me anyway, it feels like we're in a scene from Oliver Twist and we don't know, we've got a begging bowl and it's please sir can I have some more, and you're not quite sure who to go to for funding and what you can do with it and if you're going to get it, because although this one we are getting the funding, as I don't think that it should give out like this, but and especially given that we are thanking you and your team for doing this work so quickly. Can you just confirm again how many weeks from actually getting the allocation, being told that you were getting, you know, some gruel put into your bowl, how many weeks from the allocation of the funding to the application next week?
So the funds were announced by UK government, the launch prospectus for these in early March. We were contacted, I think it was middle of April. It was through the chief executive, and we were contacted seeking a meeting with their nominated civil servant who was nominated to cover our area. And so that meeting, I think, took place in just prior to the end of April. And based on that, we had to pull together the approach to these submissions.
So somewhere in the region of 5 to 6 weeks.
About 5-6 weeks. But what it does do is
anyway,
we've had to look towards.
So how do you contact community groups?
For the Community Renewal Fund, we set up the website as soon as possible after that, so that we posted notice on the website during May, with a request for submissions to be made to us. Initially, I think it was at the end of May. We gave a week-long extension for that, so it was the early part of June, which meant that we had to assess the submissions last week.
Okay, so basically it was potluck. If people were on the website, had heard it in the news and went on there.
No, I mean, what I would say is that there's been a fair degree of communication taking place with local organisations. Obviously, we've been doing a lot of the community conversations and other contact that we've got with these organisations. So we made sure to get the message out. And also, some of these organisations are very alert to this type of funding. There has been a real sense of concern amongst community organisations that have relied in the past on European Social Fund as to how they should sustain their activities, and they knew that these funds were coming, so they knew to look out for the bidding process when that was announced. So some of the organisations noted that we've received, the Community Trust. We've had bids from the likes of the Green Action Trust, from Serenians and organisations like that. They knew that this was in prospect, and therefore were poised to make submissions. And so, I fully get the frustration with the timescales that are involved with this, but to some extent it reflects the circumstances we've been in post the pandemic. That a lot of this is having to be done in short order because of the concerns over the recovery, and we're certainly used to this kind of approach. This has been particularly challenging, but what we're trying to do is align it as far as possible with the work that we're already doing, and look to build a reputation with the UK government that we can deliver, because that can be the basis of a track record that hopefully will lead to further successful bids.
Okay, I understand that, but that basically confirms what I'm saying. So work that we were already doing, i.e. work that we wanted to do but hadn't been given funding to do it. So now that they're throwing out these, grab what you can of this money tree, succeed in doing work that we wanted to do anyway, but weren't given the funding for. I appreciate that. So, and as you said, some of these organisations were looking for it and were available, but some wouldn't be, and that's just my concern, that some of them don't know how to get that the money's there, and how to apply for it. But maybe going forward we might get a bit more time and be able to do it. And I also appreciate the fact that what you said was, well, you said it far more politely, but basically get in first before the pot runs dry, and you've got more chance of getting what you're asking for. The other point that I was going to make is the one about, well, Robert also made the I'm not sure that the description of what the trust were going to do with, and I think it was either 500,000 or more than 500,000, was extremely woolly for someone like me. So I'm no idea exactly what that fund is going to do so, I would appreciate a little bit more information on what that means on the ground, because it did mention the New Arts Centre, and I thought, well, that hasn't been approved yet, never mind built, so that £500,000 is just going to be subsumed into whatever monies is going towards that, perhaps. But I'm not looking for that today, unless you want to give it to me.
I've not seen that submission, Councillor, and all I'm aware of is it's been assessed as being a priority in fitting the objectives of the bid. Part of the point of Community Renewal Fund is to build back the confidence of communities after the pandemic, and the trust in the work that they do on culture is clearly an important player in that for us locally. And I think that's the intent that they're looking to achieve through this work. Where it aligns with the Arts Centre, obviously the Council has agreed to proceed with the project, but needs to know where it should be located. We'll be talking about that at the Council meeting next week. But if doing that, then we should look to make sure that the community is actively involved in it. And this gives us some wherewithal to do that.
Excuse my wry smile, but you've just said that the work that the Community Trust were doing was important, but not important enough that we should actually keep the Trust doing this important work for this time next year. But that's a story for another day. Just finally, the Community Ownership Fund, it's back to a comment that I've made so many times. Basically, we're throwing money at people to look after facilities that we can't afford to look after. And while that might work for some communities, I don't think it's sustainable in all communities. I know that the Dobie Hall Committee has been running for a long, long time and is very successful. But let's be honest, as we've said, the reason that we're getting a priority for this level up funding is because there are a lot of areas within our Falkirk community that don't have the wherewithal to run their own facilities. And I just think that it's just not sustainable. I mean, very few, if any of us, will be here in 10 years' time. And I would be very surprised if some of these hall committees were still running in 10 years' time. And it's back to that. It's a do-it-yourself council. If you want a community hall, you're going to have to run it yourself. We'll give you some money just now, but in 10 years' time, when what in the main are very well intentioned, but retired people with time on their hands are no longer there, it just worries me that they won't have anything to show for it. Thank you, Vina.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Coombs. I've got a number of other people who still want to speak. I'll take people in order. I've got Councillor Kerr, Councillor Munro, Councillor Reid, and Councillor Nimmo. Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Regarding the Westfield roundabout, Douglas, obviously we had the money set by for that. Where will that money then go now if we're successful in this bid?
So we reported to Emergency Executive back in September last year of the work that's been taking place on each of the TIF projects, and that there was a gap in the funding. We had approval for 67 million, and the appraisal of costs on the projects had increased, and it was up to 95 million that we were seeking approval to get agreement from the Scottish Government to change the approach to delivery of the TIF to fund that amount. And bear in mind that the approach on the TIF is that we expend the money and then we've got TIF revenues come back through from non-domestic rates that repay the cost of that capital. What this allows us to do is look to that 20 million to help fund some of that gap. And that's the intention that we proceed with that. We have trailed this with Scottish Government. They're comfortable that we would take that approach, that we would seek if UK Government is willing to support it, then they can, and we would amend the TIF programme accordingly. What it would free up is the possibility, if the Scottish Government agree, to enhance the contributions that are intended towards delivery of the Avon Gorge or the Grangewife flood defences. And there's work taking place on each of these at the present time that would look to use those funds. So I think we're settled with Scottish Government. They're comfortable that we make this bid. it helps to deal with that immediate challenge on the TIF, but also enables the delivery of this as the most shovel-ready project within the package.
Okay, thanks, Douglas. I'm the same as what Councillor Bissett, Councillor Gardner regarding Avon Gorge. I think it should have been done years ago. Unfortunately, it hasn't. How confident are we that if we get this money with West Lothian, that Scottish Government will come forward with the rest of the money?
It's in, sorry, through you, Convener, the funding is earmarked in the programme for government and in the infrastructure investment plan. So it's scheduled for spend within the programme up to 2025-26. So the Scottish Government are earmarking that funds would be available for delivery of that project. They estimate the cost being around £44 million, and that they would be making a contribution of half those funds, with the balance coming through ourselves, through the TIF and through West Lothian Council. So that's the intended approach there. And therefore, if we proceed with that as a round 2 scheme for levelling up, then we could look to that being those funds being a contribution either towards the full package for the Avon Gorge, or as a contribution or part of that funding. What we're minded in the discussions with West Lothian is that that submission needs to show real added value in the provision of transport infrastructure and the economic and carbon benefits that would arise from it. And therefore we would probably need to include other measures to be associated with it. So there may be works that we're proposing at Grangemouth that they have proposed in their area that could form part of that overall larger bid. This is the work that we would propose to put underway, use some of that 125,000 of capacity money to work up these propositions, connect with West Lothian and Transport Scotland to make that submission. And I think that would be a very strong and powerful round 2 submission if we fail at round 1.
Thanks, Douglas. You mentioned about Grangemouth and about where the chemical area is, and I understand how important these areas are for Falkirk, Falkirk community. But as Councillor Gardner says, we can't forget the other parts of Falkirk. And going forward, everyone needs to get as Councillor Coombe says, everybody needs to get a share of the ball. Because the people in my area, some of them maybe work down there, but they seem to think they're being left out all the time. Regarding the Community Renewal Fund, same as what Councillor Bissett says, it would be nice to have seen that before last night. And as Councillor Coombs has already says, there's probably hundreds of community groups out there who would have loved to have got a chance to get some of this money. But I know that there wasn't a lot of time, but it's hard for the groups that didn't even get a chance to get in there.
Yeah, I mean,
comment.
Yeah, again through you, Convener, but for Councillor Kerr, I mean, I think we all have frustrations with this process. The information has been gathered at very short notice. The assessment was concluded on Friday and brought together in a summary that was circulated yesterday. But what is also evident is that the UK government does not want lots of small bids. It's looking for consolidated bids that they are able to assess straightforwardly. They're dealing with packages of submissions right across the country, so that they're not able to break this down into very small chunks. So therefore, through this work, we had to corral a variety of propositions together into that package that we see now. We hope will be successful at the 3 million of expenditure. And also, it's not straightforward to spend that order of fund by March next year. There's a lot of challenge in doing that, in setting up if staff need to be recruited, if packages of training support and so on need to be procured. There's a real challenge in delivering on this. And some may be familiar with the types of audit arrangements that have been in place in the past for European funds. We expect the same order of audit will be in place for these types of funding. And therefore, we need to make sure that it's rigorous and is going to stand up to challenge by auditors to make sure that there's value for money. So it's not straightforward to do it for that purpose. It's best to focus on larger scale bids from trusted organisations that have built up a track record with us that will be able to guarantee spend.
I understand that, Douglas, and I appreciate that. But I maybe shouldn't have called it the community renewal funding, because it's not the communities that all the communities is getting it. But thanks for your answers, Douglas. Thank you.
James, just to give you or to give you a bit of assurance that this is an issue that's right across the country. Every council's grappling with the similar issues, and while we would have liked to have seen that the Community Renewal Fund devolved right down to very much the grassroots, the guidance and the criteria and the timescales have been very much against that, and the fact that there was a clear recognition that they wanted the large bids in. So it was about bringing the smaller organisations together, and I do believe CVS have been trying to do that on their behalf. So some of our grassroots communities may well be involved in that, accessing that funding and delivering on that, but it will be done under the umbrella of one of the larger organisations. So it's probably very difficult to be able to give the level of detail that members are looking for, right down to what organisations are involved in all of those bids, because of the way we've had to do this. It's not ideal. It's been a real challenge for the service. They've had this kind of thrown on them at a time where they were just lifting their heads after delivering on all of the business grants, and they've had to go back into that acute phase again when there's a lot of work going on in the council. So it's not for the want of trying or not for the willingness to actually encourage the grassroots community organisations to be involved. It's a practical, and at the moment it's a means to an end. I'm not saying that's right, but that's what we have to work with, and it's not been easy. But the team have done a fantastic job to get to this point. Okay, Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. I note in the documents it does say that all funding provided from the fund is to be spent by March 2024 and exceptionally into 2025. However, I think the key thing in this isn't sort of the fact that the funding is available, it's about what it's for, because this is principally a levelling up fund. And as Councillor Kerr alluded to, looking at places which have been missed out, places like the Braes and Bowness, which has had little or no funding in more than 20 years. In my community, that we face the closure of the Bowness Road. We have a motorway junction which is only two-way, and we haven't had any new business units or businesses locating in the town for more than 20 years. And furthermore, there haven't actually been any built. We have a big space where the Russell Athletic shirt factory used to be some 20 years ago. And I think that we really need to think about what it is this fund is about, because if we talk about the Westfield roundabout, there we have the stadium, we have the Helix, we have the college, we have lots of business units, whereas young people leaving school in Bowness have to travel 8 miles for a job. So I think we're missing the point here. what this fund is trying to do is to help those communities that have missed out on funding, and essentially we're not tackling that. And I think that with the Westfield roundabout, we already had the TIF, and you know that this project has gone on for 8 years, as Phyllis pointed out. It's gone from 57 million to 67 million, now to 95 million. But we, as local authorities, we should be thinking of our whole communities, and I don't think in this we're doing it. In terms of having to do it now and the urgency, under 411 it makes it very clear that extra money, 125,000, is given so that local authorities can defer a bid for a whole year in order to actually dot the I's and cross the T's and make it sound and take the time to get the right project and the right scheme. And that hasn't been touched on. The deliverability emphasises that it needs to be a commercial case, that it's going to be a competitive bid, and that it has to be value for money and have a very strong economic case. So I think we will be far better pausing and actually doing this in some detail with the agreement of everybody to put forward a really sound bid that actually takes into account the fact that this is really about levelling up, not, oh, this is what we've got ready, this is what we'll put forward. It isn't really the most logical way to deal with it. I think we have to think about what the fund's for, where it would be best used, and putting forward a robust case. Otherwise, other local authorities will benefit rather than ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. I'm not sure that there's too much we can say on that. I mean, we have the opportunity of bidding for £20 million that will fund our economic regeneration for that will actually impact on the whole of Falkirk right now, or we delay a bid and we go into a far more competitive atmosphere and for future rounds where we might not rise to the top. And believe me, the other local authorities, particularly the cities, will be very much in there, and we will seem very much at the bottom of the list if we wait. And that's why it's important that we get in a bid as we are one of the top 100 going forward. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be working up other bids that can take in across the district for future rounds of this funding. There will be the Shared Prosperity Fund, but we have the risk of being left back at the gate when everybody is off and running by not getting in a bid. And unfortunately, you know, that's what happened with our growth deal, that wasn't progressed at a time when there was more funding around and we were left to the last. So I think that it would be extremely remiss of us not to look at putting in a bid for this fund at this time. Douglas, do you wanted to come back?
Maybe just for clarity, convener, on this point of how to support other places, and yes, we fully get that point of needing to make sure that all parts of our community benefit from this. So, and it is helpful that we are noted as an area for levelling up priority. But maybe this point of competition, to clarify what that looks like across the UK. Our competition isn't so much the cities. Our competition is places like Teesside, Hull, Fife, Aberdeen. These are industrial locations that are looking very strongly towards the future and what their industrial prospects are going to look like. And the alignment of these proposals with the investment proposals coming forward for industrial clusters like that is going to be significant. So we're already in on these discussions. We have real opportunities in levelling up terms. In terms of the characteristics the government's looking for, it's about economic recovery and growth. So how our industrial base is going to change through this, how we can get a transition to net zero, about improved connectivity so that we can get more goods in and out of Grangemouth in particular, which has got a real opportunity against that other competition, and in the need for regeneration to help and bolster and support our communities. So we are in a strong position here to demonstrate our message in levelling up terms, and therefore I think it's important to be cognizant of how our bid would sit against the others.
I don't think that Bowness would take kindly to the fact that Grangemouth is perceived better than Bowness. I know of companies that have located in West Lothian and in Falkirk and other places because they can't find a site, because we're not providing those kind of sites in Bowness, and that means less jobs locally for young people. And I think this is very much what this fund really intended, that we had a proper levelling up, and you know, people in Bowness feel really, really strongly that we are a forgotten town, and yet again we're saying the same thing here.
Okay, I'm going to move on. So I've still got a number of people to get to, and we have obviously a full agenda. Councillor Reid.
So thank you, Convener. Hopefully I'll just be a few seconds. You can time me if you want. In the email I received last night, it said the 5 priority areas were marked in green. Unfortunately, green didn't appear in my screen, and I wondered if Douglas could list the 5 projects for me, please.
Douglas, you're on mute.
I've got it here on my screen, Councillor. That's strange that it wasn't noted. But, and so my computer has frozen, but the projects I understand going forward are there's a Green Action Trust project, one from that. Sorry, my computer has frozen.
I'll read them out if you want, Douglas. I've got them in front of me.
There you are.
So
in the interest of speed, Robert can send me a message.
I'll send that across.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Nimmo.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just a couple of points. I don't have a problem with the funding in general, and I really do hope as a council that we are successful in what we're asking for, and we can invest the funds. Just going back to the Avon Gorge, there's been a lot said about the Avon Gorge. Now, this project seems to have been a priority for as long as I can remember. It is a major development after all, and it's not just about a bridge, it's about the upgrading of the road networks that are attached to that. And at the end of the day, it's going to benefit Falkirk and not just Grangemouth. To coin a phrase from Douglas, he used the phrase shovel ready. Well, the Avon Gorge project has had over 20 years to become shovel ready. We can blame others, we can blame other local authorities, we can blame governments, but at the end of the day, this project is still going to take years to come to fruition, and that's quite simply not good enough. Councillor Bissett alluded at the very start that there have been a significant number of deaths on this stretch of road. Now, what I want to know is, what is Falkirk Council going to do to protect motorists over the next few years until this project is finalised? Now, spending £24 million on a walkway in the sky at the Falkirk Stadium is going to do absolutely nothing to protect the citizens of Falkirk who have to use the Avon Gorge on a regular basis. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, Douglas.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of protection for motorists, we've protection of the public, that's clearly a duty that we have, and therefore we have a service. And Dot Reid's on the call. You know, she's the head of service covering the roads team, and their work is fundamentally, primarily directed towards making sure that the roads network is safe. So all of the measures that we have in place currently and that we would look to maintain whilst we prepare for those works will be with the objective of keeping the public safe. And that goes at the Avon Gorge and will also go at Westfield. And something we're concerned about at Westfield is the risk to pedestrians and so on that we could incur as a consequence of increased traffic use at that junction. So the measures we're proposing will be with the intention of helping public safety for cyclists and pedestrians at that location, as well as adding to the connectivity for active travel around that part of the town. So in both terms, we would firstly have that priority of keeping the public safe, whilst looking to this investment that helps to improve at both locations.
Well, Douglas, I'm one of the users of the Avon Gorge on a regular basis, and I can honestly say that over the last 20 years or so, or however long it's been going on, I haven't seen any change to the road network at the Avon Gorge at all. Nothing has been done to protect the lives of motorists due to the deaths that have occurred on that stretch of road over the years. Nothing has changed.
Through you, Convener, and I mean, Dot's on the call. I don't know if she'll want to add any comment around the measures that we have taken in place, but if there are accidents, then any significant accidents would all be investigated to determine if there are further measures that are necessary. As I say, there are measures in place, and we do regular inspections to make sure that the public is protected. So, you know, I would want to give that assurance that that would be maintained whilst any new proposals come forward.
I could certainly comment, Convener, if you'd like me to.
Yeah, thanks, Dot.
Yes, we have certainly done some work there, and what Douglas says is obviously correct in terms of accident statistics being monitored. It may well be that a number of the accidents have been on the West Lothian side of the bridge, and therefore that is their responsibility to take action. But what I can say is that the safety fence, the vehicle restraint system on Falkirk side was replaced approximately 18 months ago. There was slippage in the embankment that was found just on the other side of that vehicle restraint system. The embankment has been stabilised, the barrier was installed, and the road was resurfaced to improve texture on the road to involve skidding, to negate skidding accidents. So there certainly has been work undertaken there to address accidents over the last 18 months or so.
Thanks, Dot. And in relation to the bids, as soon as we were aware that it was going to be within the programme for government and therefore the Scottish Government's share of the contribution, the project was revisited, and I do believe, Douglas, at that time there was a need to update the design as design standards, or sorry, so its building standards had changed, and to update the costings. And all of that would be required before it could go for the various approvals and tendering. And that's kind of the where we are. That works in the moment going on. Is that kind of?
That's the case. So that's why we're saying it will take a wee bit more time to finalise that in order to prepare for a round 2 submission.
Yeah. And we had to, of course, speak to our partners around the funding package to ensure that all of that was in place. But it's heartening to hear from Dot that everything that can be done is being done around the safety aspects, and that we're confident that we've done as much as we possibly can, and giving knowledge to drivers. The area has to be managed carefully by notice, etc. Okay, Councillor Hughes, I saw your hand up there. If it can be reasonably brief.
And unmuted.
Oh, all I wanted to say, convener, was I wanted for the record, as an elected member for Upper Braes, I wanted to put on record that I welcome the fact that Avon Gorge has been put forward to the Levelling Up Fund. But could I also say that if Manny Shinwell was alive today, I suspect that he would be pleased as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Because
you.
the point I'm
Councillor
making is
Hughes.
that the history of the Avon Gorge stretches right back to the 1920s. And although progress over, shall we say, the last 100 years has been slow, I welcome the progress to date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hughes. I think we've had a very broad-ranging discussion today, and there's no disagreement. I think everybody is content and has an understanding of how challenging it's been around this fund and getting together the various bids to go forward. And we are very clear that the Avon Gorge is a priority, but it's not ready to go as a bid, and it needs to be done as a joint bid. Therefore, that we agree that Westfield is our best opportunity at this stage to go forward for that funding. Recognise that we will look to work up bids that are shovel ready for future rounds of funding going forward, and the Community Renewal Fund package of the 3 million has now been put together and will be submitted. Therefore, are we happy to agree the paper?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues, for that. If we move on to item 7, it's the climate emergency update. And I think again we're back with Douglas.
Dr. Reid's going to present that report, Cecil.
Okay, right,
Sorry,
thank you. Over to Dot.
Thank you, convener. The paper provides an update on work that will ensure that Falkirk Council meets its legislatory obligations in terms of reducing carbon emissions. The report presents an initial action plan for approval that will help us work towards meeting our net zero carbon reduction target by 2030. Section 2 of the report makes a number of recommendations that will enable the continuation of work that's ongoing to allow achievement of our target. By way of background, members will recall that in August 2019 at Executive Committee, a climate emergency was declared. Since then, work has progressed in a number of different ways to ensure that we comply with legislation to meet our net zero carbon target by 2030. And it's important to note in section 3 of the report that even with the measures proposed that will help us to reduce emissions, there will be carbon emissions remaining that will require to be offset by alternative means, with the recommended means being by carbon sequestration. And that means the planting of around 40,000 trees or installing green roofs and walls to allow carbon to be captured from the atmosphere. It's a concern that initial studies have considered that land available to the council for sequestration purposes falls short of what is required for that purpose. Section 4 of the report provides details of work undertaken so far relating to climate change. Firstly, climate change has been declared as a top 10 project under the Council of the Future header. The Council of the Future project has identified gaps in the number and scale of potential projects to enable services to meet targets, and the project has set some key milestones to address gaps. The potential projects include each individual council service working to achieve organisational climate targets and as well as national targets. The project also includes climate change being embedded in governance structures, implementing a formal reporting mechanism for how each service records spend in relation to climate change, and that services should begin to deliver individual projects identified in the Climate Change Project Register. A greater proportion of council buildings should have lower carbon emissions, and a greater proportion of the council fleet should run on low carbon energy. Section 4 of the report also advises that a climate change cross-party working group has been formed, and Executive will be aware that this group involves representation from each of the main political parties within the Council, as well as senior officer representation. The overall remit of the group includes prioritising actions to be taken by the Council in response to the Climate Emergency Declaration with the aim of achieving net zero emissions by 2030. Outputs from the group will help to further develop the Climate Emergency Action Plan that is attached as Appendix 1 to the report, further identifying additional measures for the Council to progress to address the climate emergency relating to Falkirk as an area. Section 4 of the report also advises on carbon literacy training. Executive will be aware that a carbon literacy training programme is underway for elected members and senior officers, with the aim of those attending becoming climate leaders and champions. The first cohort started training in March. Training will enable the Council to achieve carbon literate accreditation status. Carbon literacy training supports the development of measures which will inform officers and thereby enable a reduction in our organisational and area-wide emissions, as well as help to facilitate the delivery of other outcomes in line with the Council's priority to embed action on climate change. Subsequent rounds of training dates have been identified, and it's hoped that all elected members and senior management teams within each service will have completed this training by September or October this year, and that this will enable the Council to achieve silver accreditation. Thereafter, it's intended that there is further rollout of training. Section 4 of the report also advises on carbon budgeting. COP21 Paris Agreement binds nations to hold global temperature rise by 2050 to under 2 degrees Celsius. At the moment, we are seeking to appoint an external advisor to work with all services to produce a carbon budgeting process that provides guidance throughout the Council. There will be a mechanism put in place to monitor and record the Council's achievement of both national and organisational targets, and we will seek to align this requirement to existing financial budgetary structures and processes. The final item in Section 4 of the report relates to carbon sequestration that I've already mentioned. As I explained, it's unlikely that the Council will be able to achieve net zero for its own organisational emissions, and the report advises that our total sequestration target per annum is 13,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. The initial study has identified that there is a shortfall in suitable land available for adaptation to allow our target to be met. The next steps in progressing sequestration will be to prepare a more in-depth study of land use and potential land use change. The initial Climate Change Action Plan, that is an appendix to the report, has been prepared as part of the Council of the Future Climate Change project work. This plan has been approved by the Cross-Party Climate Change Working Group and the Corporate Sustainability Group. However, to support this, the Cross-Party Working Group will prepare a fuller action plan later this year. The initial action plan sets milestones for services to incorporate climate change into all strategies, plans and projects going forwards, as I outlined earlier. This will help to give climate change priority alongside other considerations when formal decisions are made by the Council. The report advises that there are financial, resource, legal and risk implications associated with the current measures and proposed measures. And these are that we will not be able to secure funding for energy efficient measures if we aren't prioritising climate change objectives to the fullest capacity. That we will be liable for potential financial penalties for not addressing climate change. That we will be unable to offset residual emissions without a sequestration plan. That we won't deliver on the 2030 target, and that we won't secure capital funding required for the project. currently estimated at £62 million. So to conclude, this report recommends in section 2 that Executive notes the progress being made on the Council's response to the climate emergency, agrees the Climate Change Action Plan, agrees the plan of work proposed in relation to carbon sequestration and carbon budgeting, and agrees to implement a programme of carbon literacy training for elected members and staff with the aim of achieving a minimum of gold standard for the Council. And finally, that the Council agrees that the post of Energy and Climate Change Coordinator is created to coordinate delivery of recommendations and working with services to ensure that these are progressed effectively and delivered at pace. Douglas, Marie-Claire Morgan and myself would be happy to respond to any questions that you may have relating to this report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dot. And just before I hand over to Councillor Garner, just to make the committee aware that as part of COP26, Sasha Dench was flying in on a microlight, and I'm pleased to say that she is going to visit Falkirk, and she will fly over Celtic Renewals into the Kelpies. And there's an intention to do a piece of work with our young people in a mini COP 26, and that's just one of the events that is currently in the planning in the run up to COP 26. But we've just had that confirmed today that she will be stopping off in Falkirk. Councillor Garner.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks to Dot for going through the report. She covered pretty much everything there. I'd also like to thank Marie-Claire for the amount of work she puts in all the time, basically, but she's put a lot of work into this report and bringing things forward and got us to where we are now. It's great to read the report on climate emergency and see that progress is being made. In 4.1, it states climate change is one of the top 10 priorities. I'd say it's very high in that list, and it has to be embedded in every decision we make. In 4.2, we can read a mindset change is required. This means everyone within the Council, and maybe most importantly, us elected members as decision makers. To assist with this, the Climate Change Action Group have been working together, and that is evidenced in some of what is contained within the report. I'm sure all the members agree, this group is enhancing our knowledge, focusing our attention and bringing forward ideas and policies. I'd like to thank all the current members for their input and enthusiasm. On increasing members and staff, which the group agreed was a priority, we propose Falkirk Council should undertake a programme of carbon literacy training for councillors and some staff and reach gold standard, as Dot mentioned. The extension of this is included in 2.14. In the recommendations 2.15, the post of Climate Change Coordinator is to bolster the Council's existing response to the climate emergency and to help achieve national net zero ambitions in line with their statutory obligations. The Energy and Climate Change team provide a corporate-wide strategic function similar to that of resilience or equalities. All outputs of service delivery undertaken by the Council have dependencies and risks associated with climate change and decarbonisation. In order to effectively manage our response, cutting across all areas of service delivery, it is imperative that, similar to other strategic teams such as sustainable transport or environmental and grounds, the ECC team have a coordinator who can scope and manage work as well as affecting change at pace, and pace is very important as we go forward. Timelines for the Council to act are reducing, and resolutions require planning and significant forethought prior to implementation. With the Council responsible for meeting statutory targets in climate change mitigation, energy efficiency and decarbonisation, as well as adaptation to be built into each output budgetary decision and service delivery aspect. The coordinator will be responsible to delegating and directing a response in each of these extensive areas. On a side note, I was invited along last week to Bintascan Primary School and their early learning centre in their Eco Ranger project. The knowledge and enthusiasm of the youngsters was a joy to behold. Recycling, energy saving, using food waste, active travel, and understanding the importance of biodiversity was so good to see. Credit goes to Tracy, Jack, her staff, parents, and most of all the kids. If this is anything to go by, the future is bright, the future is green in Falkirk. So, Convener, I think it's easy to see I fully support the recommendations contained within, and can I just emphasise we need to really do what we say we will do, not just talk some hot air. Thank you, Convener. Happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Garner, for that. Councillor Bowes?
Thank you, Convener. It's good to follow the presentation by Paul, which was very good. Our actions in the next 8.5 years and probably beyond on climate change are not for our benefit, but for our children and our grandchildren's benefits. I welcome the measures on capacity building to adapt and implement the climate action change plans, with installing low carbon heating to non-residential properties, improving energy efficiency of residential properties with £96 million being spent on windows and door replacement, the ongoing replacement of street lighting, and the planting of 40,000 trees. For the next one, I suppose I should declare a slight interest, because in 3 months' time I'm hopefully going to be an EV car driver. But I think that's one of the most important ones, is the changing of the fleet to EV or hydrogen power, and the introduction of more EV charging points on top of the 97 that we already have. But as most of us know, we need to do more. This has been said before, it's a duty for us to lead on this, and the movement away from particularly the internal combustion engine will be as significant as its introduction. I'm happy to second Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. Climate change has no easy answers, but the answers are pretty clear, and a lot of it's around behavioural change. And I think we have to be able to demonstrate that behavioural change ourselves, and that comes down to individuals as well as an organisation. That may well require some bold and brave decisions to be made, but I think now's the time to be able to do that. And as has been said by both Councillor Bowes and Councillor Garner, we need to be showing actions rather than words, and actually delivering on some of this in order to influence others as well. And there's a variety of ways in which that can be done. I think the carbon literacy training has been really helpful, if nothing else, in enabling people to have conversations, conversations with their colleagues, conversations with family, conversations with friends and communities, and that is just as important in trying to make that behavioural change. I'll open things up now for any questions or comments, and I've got Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Convener. You literally just stole a few of my words there about the fact that it is us. We can't talk about it as if it's out there. It's every individual's actions that are making a difference. And I think that some of these actions that we need to change and some of these habits that we need to change are uncomfortable, because we like getting in our own cars. And we like doing our own thing, but I think that it's what we're doing within the council is very, very commendable. However, it's only just scratching the surface, and I think that over the next couple of years, and it's like we talk about it as though it's an emergency, and we call it the climate emergency. If it was a real emergency, we would be throwing a huge amount of effort and far more money at it than we did. I mean, the pandemic was an emergency, and everybody stopped what they were doing and focused directly upon that, and for obvious reasons, because people were dying. Well, this is the same thing. People are going to be dying very shortly because of the impact of what we have been doing since the Industrial Revolution. Everything well, just look out the window, and across the UK we're getting hotter, wetter, drier, stormier weather, and that's all down to what we as a population have been doing over the last few years. So I think that we do need to first of all take responsibility for it, and obviously like Paul said, the Climate Action Group has done a lot of good work, but it's very much as an aside thing, and we need to make it integral to what the council is doing. And I think that having a carbon budget attached to every single department within the council should make a difference. Also, the fact that everybody's doing literacy training will hopefully help to raise awareness and the need for the changes that we should be doing. As I said, it's public transport, though. I mean, people aren't going to leave their cars at home. You'll know, I've had my electric car now. Well, it's the second one. I think it was about 6 years ago or something like that. We moved it, but to go away anywhere, I get a petrol-driven car from the garage, because if you're going more than a couple of 100 miles, it's too awkward at the moment. It shouldn't be that way. Society should have it so that I can charge my car as easily as everybody else can fill their car with petrol and diesel. So until I actually make that switch, the odd few weirdos like me and Douglas Duff apparently now has joined the gang of EV drivers. And Gary, I heard you, Gary. But as I say, it's still very much in the minority, and I understand why. But until those big changes are made, we're only just, as I say, putting a little dent in it. The other thing that I was going to say is that some of the stuff that we're doing is contradictory, because we are still spending far more money on roads and encouraging, as Douglas said, more lorries to come into Grangemouth to move more goods. We need to stop doing that. We need to stop expecting to be buying strawberries in November, and the transport of goods and the habits that we have. We need to take more individual responsibility, as I said, for our eating habits. My daughter keeps trying to get me to become a vegan. I'm slowly but surely reducing the amount of meat, but things like that, realizing that every little thing that we do makes a big difference to our society and our planet. And as I say, I do look forward to the changes that we make. I also look forward to the Scottish Government doing something about INEOS, who are pumping out many megatons of carbon, far more than anything else in the whole of Scotland. So I think that, again, we need to make the big changes as well as all the little changes. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Douglas, do you want to come back and make any comment on that at this stage?
I think by and large, sorry, Dr.
Just agree with everything I said.
Yeah, just agreed.
I was just going to say there that through the Grangemouth Future Industry Board, we are working with partners across Grangemouth, looking at infrastructure, looking at carbon. There is a bit of work ongoing there, and conversations are taking place. It's too early to report any of that back at this stage, but we are in conversation with industry in Grangemouth, businesses in Grangemouth, relating to infrastructure and how that can be adapted and improved. So I'm sure, Douglas, I don't know if you want to say any more on that, but there will be reports on that coming forward in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's very central to the work that's taking place through the investment zone, is to work with those stakeholders to help Grangemouth move to net zero. It's part of our overall net zero commitment. Industry gets this. They know that they need to move in that direction. They have to help achieve that balance, the balance of getting to net zero whilst keeping their businesses going. But increasingly, you will see that industry gets it, and INEOS are a good example of it. Pick up their staff magazine, look at their magazine on the web. It's all about climate change. It's all about net zero. So they are cognizant of it, but their challenge is how they get there. And if we can work with them and help them to get there, then all the better, because that helps our communities.
I appreciate that, but a business that Mr. Ratcliffe is based on fossil fuels, it's highly unlikely to be, turned around and green in my life anyway. But I do appreciate that what you're saying, and I'm glad to hear that. But as I said, it's the amount of transport that we have, and if we stop buying as much and expecting so much, then perhaps we wouldn't be moving so much in the big HGV lorries. But to say, I appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Okay, I have Councillor Kerr and then Councillor Nimmo and then Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of questions for Doe or Douglas. See the new vehicles that we're going to buy. Do we buy them or lease them?
At the moment, we buy them.
Okay. And how long do we keep them, Doe?
It's generally around 8 years for the larger vehicles.
Right, okay. I'm just thinking if we keep them for a small amount of time, we're not actually getting rid of the carbon because we're selling them on. So the carbon from the vehicles will still be there, just that somebody else will be using them. Eh?
It depends on the condition of the vehicles after the 8 years. Certainly, a number of our vehicles, you know, they're used daily. They don't have a lot of life left in them at the end of 8 years very often. But I know that's a bit general, but certainly knowing the type of work that's undertaken, refuse collection vehicles, roads vehicles, they are heavily used and there's not a lot of life left in them at the end of the 8 years.
Right, thanks, Doc. It is disappointing that we haven't got the land that we wanted to get more trees. 40,000 in the grand scale of things isn't massive amounts, and it would be nice if we could get more. And I'm glad that I heard you saying that there is a plan ahead to look at this and create more. So because that is a big help going forward. There is obviously regarding the new windows and doors. I didn't want to comment on that because the contract's not been finalised yet, but it's something that I'm going to speak to the leader and Councillor Bissett regarding how we look at these going forward. But thanks, a great report, Doc. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. I've got 4 questions here. I'm just on the back of Councillor Kerr's questions there as well. The first question is, how many vehicles does the council actually have at the moment in total?
I'm sorry, I couldn't answer that.
Yeah, I've got it, Dot. We've got about 600 vehicles, Alan.
Right, okay. The next question, how many electric vehicles does the council have at the moment?
There's 72 electric vehicles in the fleet just now.
Right. And the next question is, what we've saved so far with the electric vehicles that we have? Because I know we've had them for a number of years now, so there's bound to be a saving involved.
Don't have that, but I can ask the fleet manager to get that information for you, Councillor Nimmo.
Right, okay. And going back to what Gary was saying earlier on, we've got 97 charging points within the Falkirk Council area. Are we actually charging people for using them? And if so, how much are we actually raised from the charging?
We just started charging for the for electric vehicles. It was agreed in the budget last financial year at the last budget meeting in 2020, but it wasn't implemented because of the pandemic. We implemented it at the start of this year, and I think we estimated we would get around 30,000 of a saving as a consequence of that. Now, obviously, some of that's been affected by the pandemic. And in terms of levels of usage, but you know, it has been noted that the electric vehicle charging hub at the stadium is the most popular in the country, so it's got the highest use of any hub facility like that in Scotland.
Right, so just on the back of that then, Douglas, the amount of money that we raise from these charging points, what happens with it? Is it being reinvested in eco side of things, or what's happening with the money?
No, the money that was earmarked as a saving was contributing towards the revenue budget. So that was a straightforward saving. Funds that are obtained from the electric vehicle charging hub at the stadium go towards the cost of its provision. That was an arrangement that was secured through the TIF and European Regional Development funding that was arranged through Transport Scotland. That was the design of that scheme was, it cost about £1 million to put in place, 600k from TIF, 400 from European funds, and the TIF will be repaid through the receipts from charging.
Okay, thanks, Douglas. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anyone else who's indicated to come in. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bissett, you did. Beg your pardon.
Thanks, Convener. Just like to say I welcome this report, and I've been doing the training, and I think it's been very insightful, focuses people's minds. So I'd like to thank Mary Claire for organising that training. Climate change, there is a sense of immediacy about this, where in the past, when I was at Stirling Royal, maybe in 1994, I implemented something called Green Code, and it was almost like it was a box ticking exercise. Let's go through this. It was developed with Strathclyde University, but we're way beyond that now. This needs to be embedded in every council activity that we do, into policy, into people's budgets, as was mentioned before, a carbon budget. The only way we're going to succeed is by changing people's behaviours, and that takes a collective responsibility. You could say we've only got one planet, and we need to save the planet. But that's such a big concept for people at a sort of local level. It's hard to kind of get their head around that and what impact they can really have. But you can have a significant impact. You look at your own carbon footprint, and what you can say is, well, I've tried to make a change, so collectively we can all make a change. But there needs huge political change across the planet for other countries that, might be saying, well, why can we not industrialise like you've industrialised? You want to hold us back. So China wants to build huge coal-fired power stations. You're going to say that's wrong? Clearly it is wrong, but we're going to try and hold back these economies. And as we bring about this change, whether it be reducing eating meat and dairy products, clearly that'll have an effect on farmers. And so it is a delicate balance as you start to reduce dependence on other activities that we've had in the past. There's going to be an effect on jobs and the economy, and getting that balance right is very difficult. So definitely welcome it, but I wanted to say something about in the report. It says improving energy efficiency and installing low carbon heating in residential housing. Now, if the finance capital on the agenda coming up, there's a capital discussion, and within that it says there's an outturn variance in housing investment of 9.2 million. So clearly that's 9.2 million that we've not been able to spend, and that is on energy efficiency. So given that climate change is a priority, should we not be reprioritising that and trying to get the energy efficiency work done? And I know that it's in the top 10, climate change in the top 10 in the council, but personally I think it should be the #1 priority in the council, because it's of such importance, and it's important that we cascade this out through the organisation. And it's the schools. Mr. Naylor, I'm sure will be well aware that the children are the future, and it needs to be embedded in all the school curriculum, and the children themselves can change their parents' behaviour. So completely welcome this report, and just like to say thanks very much to everyone involved in it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. I think the issue around the capital programme and the housing can be maybe dealt with in the capital item, and the explanation around that, because I think while we would like to see that progressed, there's factors out with our control that are influencing that at the moment. And just to say, in relation to the curriculum, that there's a pilot programme at Larbert High School, and I don't know whether Mr. Naylor maybe wants to speak a wee bit about that and the potential for that to be rolled out across the council area following the outcome of the pilot.
Thank you, convener. Yes, as you say, there's a pilot programme underway at Larbert, and the intention would be that once the learning from that is complete, that would become a kind of core part of the curriculum across the secondary schools. And I think, as Councillor Garner has already mentioned, there's significant work going on across the estate, both in primary and secondary, in terms of the awareness raising of young people, changes in the dietary offer in school dinners, and so on, beginning to be embedded. And as members will be aware, we have a number of climate ambassadors that are participating in one of the council working groups. So this is very much an agenda that is front and centre in our schools.
Okay, thank you. Okay, colleagues, are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. If we can now take a 5-minute comfort break, if we can come back for 12:05, and we'll be able to continue with the rest of the agenda. Thank you. Item 8, the Business Improvement District renewal, and I don't know whether it's Douglas or Jackie that's taken this one.
I'll do it, and Jackie's joined us to pick up on any questions, convener.
Okay, thank you, Douglas.
So this report relates to the renewal arrangements for the Falkirk Business Improvement District, the BID, and the report summarises the work that they've been doing to prepare for the ballot, and it seeks approval from the council for the next stage of work on the ballot to proceed. And therefore we're asking to note the work that's been taking place to make arrangement for that ballot, that we should exercise, we should not exercise our right to veto the reballot, that based on a positive outcome from other bid levy payers to undertake the reballot, that the council should commence the procedures for that to take place, and that we report back on the result. So the Business Improvement District is in place to support the Falkirk Town Centre and to promote the interests of the various businesses that operate within its area. The Business Improvement District operates on the basis of a levy, which is charged to non-domestic ratepayers within Falkirk Town Centre, and the definition of the area for eligibility for the bid is attached as an appendix. The bid is delivered by Falkirk Towns Limited, a partnership company that was established to run the operations of the bid, and they work very closely with the council, with businesses in the town centre, and help with the operations of the Falkirk Town Centre partnership. Its main aims are set out in its business plan, which identifies a range of projects, initiatives and services which support businesses, help to enhance the physical environment of the town centre, ensure safety for town centre users and visitors, and bring forward various projects that in other cases the council wouldn't be able to deliver. It's been operating now for 3 terms and is due for a further ballot to enter into a new 5-year delivery period. There's around 662 commercial properties in the bid area, and if successful, the levy income arising from those properties would give around £171,000 per annum, 857k over the 5-year term of the bid's operations. The work of the bid is instrumental to the council's own plans through its economic recovery plan and town centre action plan, and therefore accords well with the council's own priorities. And in the course of that, their work in relation to the pandemic has been very central to helping the town centre businesses recover in recent months, and the bid was central to a number of initiatives that have helped those companies, and there's some details in the report, and I'm sure Jackie will be able to give some more detail of the work that they've undertaken there, helping over 200 businesses in the area with attraction of external funds of £60,000. And in the course of that, they operated a number of schemes, including a local gift card scheme, which was innovative of its type around the country. What we have set out is the timetable for delivery of the bids ballot and the declaration of a result. So that's set out at section 4.2 of the scheme, and it notes that in the first instance, the council has to respond in writing as to whether it wishes to veto or not veto the ballot proposal. And it's suggested that the council, as the bids intentions accord with the council's objectives for the town centre, that we should look to support the bid and not to veto the ballot taking place. If that's confirmed also through confirmation from other bid levy players, then the intention is to issue an instruction to convene the ballot and then to report back following the count, which will take place after the ballot on 26th August, with a declaration of results on 3rd of September. Consultation takes place fully with the various town centre businesses to pull together a business plan that will set out to the bid's intentions over the next 5 years. And based on the exercise of the ballot, it's hoped that around 541 eligible voters will express support for the bid, and that would allow its work to proceed. We set out in section 6 of the report the financial implications for the bid. Obviously, this accords well with Council's objectives, and we do provide financial support to the bid of 79,000 in the current financial year. An additional 30,000 of funds is directed to them for public safety measures like taxi marshalling and the Safe Base, which has been directed more recently towards COVID recovery measures and public protection there. We also allocated support through the Economic Recovery Plan of 50,000 back in last November to support staff who will aid initiatives in the town centre, and that includes measures in district centres, with some additional funding now being agreed for the new financial year to allow that activity in district centres to be sustained. So in conclusion, all the implications accord well with the Council's objectives, and therefore we're suggesting that there's no need to exercise a veto over the ballot. We should support the conduct of that ballot and look to a further report once the outcome of the ballot is received. We're happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thank you, Douglas. I think this is a fairly straightforward report. I think the Falkirk Towns Partnership has done a huge amount of work, particularly over COVID. The new town centre manager came in the week before lockdown, and she was kind of thrown in at the deep end, and it was very much sink or swim, and she's done a fantastic job with the support of the board, and I know that there's been a lot of new people on the board over the recent times as well, and coming forward, but we would not have been in such a positive position with our businesses in the town centre coming through the acute phase and into that recovery without the support of the town centre and the work that they've done, and levering in through the business grants, because there's been a lot of shoe leather and actually speaking to people and making sure that they apply for the grants and getting them in the best possible position. They've also played a significant role within our town centre partnership meeting, and they are our advocate and our conduit to the business community, and they are helping shape what our town centre is going to be going forward for the future. And I thank them for the work that they're doing there, as it's not particularly easy, as people want to see instant responses, and I know are frustrated with the process that the council has to go through, and the due diligence we have to go through to decide anything. But they are helping to do that, and they're also helping to keep the town centre businesses and the town centre and develop that town centre community, keeping them informed going forward. And we recognised, as has been said, that the experience and the knowledge and the on the ground ability of the town centres partnership at the town centre delivers, particularly through COVID, and the need to be able to support our district centres as much as Falkirk Town Centre. And I believe firmly it was the right thing to do to give some additional funding there and to continue that, as we know that the impacts of COVID on our town centres is going to be recurring for some time. So giving that additional boost, additional help to be able to share and coordinate and provide some support is, I think, is essential going forward. And obviously, as things relax and our hospitality trade opens up, the Falkirk Delivers supports the Safe Base and our taxi marshals, ensuring that Falkirk's a safe place to be able to go out and socialise, and have been very, very robust in making sure that all the businesses can adhere to the COVID regulations. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to continue to be robust on going forward, as people start to find that new freedom to socialise more. So I'm more than happy to support the recommendations that we don't veto the ballot, and we continue to work with Falkirk Delivers in supporting them going out to ballot for this next period of the bid going forward. And I am happy to open it up for any other questions. Okay, I've got Councillor Kerr, then I've got Councillor Munro.
Thanks, Convener. I'm quite happy to second that proposal. Listening to Jackie and Elaine Grant at the Falkirk Town Partnership, the passion that they showed when they were doing their report, it shows how much hard work they've put into how successful the town centre has been during the pandemic, and the delivery sales that they managed to enact. It's helped businesses through the pandemic, because if they wouldn't have got the delivery sales, a lot of them would have been struggling, especially when you mentioned the grants, Convener. A lot of businesses didn't know these grants were there, and it was the bid team that was able to bring these forward for the businesses who a lot of them would have shut and closed, but that's them being on the front foot has helped these businesses. And the gift card, we've seen a wee video of the gift card, the one that they've enacted, and it's not just for Falkirk Town Centre, it's for Grangemouth, Bo'ness, Dennismere, so you can use them anywhere. And I'd encourage, I don't know if Jack can send it out to all members to let them have a wee see let them see the video. It's certainly forward thinking as a town centre, and when we've got people like who we've got in place and how passionate they are, that can only look good for the town centre of Falkirk. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, James, and I'm sure we can arrange for a link for the video to be circulated to all members. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. I think this actually is a good news story for Falkirk, because it demonstrates how being visible and on the ground actually makes a big difference. We've had a bid, as we said, since 2008, and its performance has varied markedly. And I think we should, like you said, be very grateful that Elaine Grant came along when she did, because together with Jackie MacArthur, they have worked tirelessly to listen and be visible for all, 600 and something small businesses, to help them with their grant applications, to resolve the issues and problems they were facing. So much listening, so much on the ground, doing some very simple, basic things that really mattered to our shops. And not only have they actually won the support of those shopkeepers by their actions, they've also instituted all these new initiatives about deliveries and other things. And I think it's a tremendous initiative that has taken place for small businesses, which are the future in the end. That some of these are going to grow into the larger businesses in the future. And the fact that throughout this pandemic, we've actually seen more shops take up residence in the high street, another 40 or more shops, to really sort of gives credit to the work of this partnership. And I think, in a way, since we're not going to actually resolve the issues of the high street, whatever decisions are made over HQ and Arts Centre in the short term, we should be giving, as a council, more than the very modest sum we do, in order to facilitate them having events and more things in the high street, and facilitating and encouraging people to return to the shops there. And I commend Jackie and the bid team, because it's been a really robust effort in a difficult time.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I would echo what Ellen has just said, particularly as it relates to Jackie. Anyone who survived the various battles in Denny and came out still smiling is worthy of a medal, in fact. She's in a maybe calmer atmosphere in Falkirk in many regards, not least, well, I won't go into it, not at least. Could I ask a question? However, the bid is obviously based on a rateable value, the amount raised, and the new rule regarding occupancy whereby non-residential tax continues to be paid. Does that mean that at the moment Marks and Spencer's, having signed up 5 years ago, is still paying towards the bid as things stand at the moment?
Okay, Pat, try and get an answer for that. I don't know, Douglas, are you able to?
Yeah, they certainly should be, but I can get that checked, Councillor. So check that one out.
It's just that
there is.
Sorry.
There's obviously provision for payment of empty buildings, non-domestic rates, so normal course buildings that aren't occupied still have to pay the rates. There have been instances where, you know, there's various properties have managed to avoid doing that, but in the instance of Marks and Spencer's, we can certainly get that checked.
So is it the case there could be several companies in that regard? Will they then be entitled to take part in the vote? And if so, do they only get one vote regardless of their size?
Yeah, yes. The eligibility to vote is based on the address and the rateable entity as an address. So in fact, we have some small businesses that have a number of different entities within their company, and they get individual bids, votes, and payments that they have to make, whilst we do have large single entries that have the one vote and the one payment.
Okay. So the loss of a large occupier is not necessarily as onerous as the loss of a smaller. They're both the same.
Except that the amount that they pay in the levies is clearly important. In ballot terms, it's not as significant, but in levy terms, it is. So it depends on just on what effect they've made through their payment of non-domestic rates. So let me check the details on the likes of Marks and Spencers and what they're paying.
I've been rather heavy-handed about this one. Not my apologies for I'm trying to work my way through the complexities that is Marks and Spencers paying what they paid previously, despite the fact that they don't occupy the property. If they're not, then that would mean a big loss, I assume. Because although they only have one vote, they'll be paying a lot more than the wee guy that repairs telephones, for example. Yeah. Okay. I'll look forward to that.
Jackie's looking to come in.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps Jackie has answered. Right. Okay.
Yeah. I can say that Marks and Spencers has now been sold, but yes, they were still eligible to pay their bid levy. And the levy is determined by the rateable value of the property. So in our case, we charge 1.25% of properties with a rateable value of over £10,000. And for other ones, so if you have a smaller property with a rateable value up to £5,000, you only pay £50 a year. And then from the 5,000 to 10,000 bracket, it's £100 a year. So you can see it's a sliding scale, and all properties over that would pay their 1.25% of their levy. If that makes it any clearer for you, Councillor.
It does, I think. So the bigger you are, the more you do pay.
That's correct.
Yeah. So if the big people were to vote against the levy,
yes,
they're in danger of losing quite a bit of money.
Of course.
Should the result be in their favour, of course. Yeah.
Of course.
Right.
And that is the difficulty in Falkirk with the loss of many of our larger retailers. That does put, it makes it much more of a vulnerable situation.
Okay. As I say, sorry to be so ham-handed. I think my brain hasn't clicked in yet. I think. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Pat. Councillor Bissett.
Yeah, I'll be brief, convener. I think the BID's doing a great job, and certainly they've done their wee bit for the climate change. They deliver 3,500 parcels and saved 25 non-essential miles. So well done for doing that bit for climate change, and actually assisting people by delivering 3,000 prescriptions and 10,000 meals to local food banks, which is really commendable. And I know they've been very supportive of fledgling businesses and trying to get them started and get things moving. And we've seen an increase in businesses in the town centre. So I welcome this report and support the recommendations. But I'd just like to ask if the model of the bid is, if we consider sort of, I know there's outreach to Kenny, Grangemouth, Stenhousemuir, Bo'ness. I just wonder if we've thought of rolling out that model, the bid model, to these Stenhousemuir, Grangemouth, Bo'ness, Kenny. Have we considered that sort of mirroring that model locally?
That exact question was asked recently at the Town Centre Partnership meeting, and we had Phil Prentice there, and he kind of gave some advice on that. I don't know whether Jackie, you maybe want to come back and reiterate a wee bit of what was said around that.
Of course, convener. I think we all recognise the work that a bid can do in a town centre, and the benefits that brings to the communities there, and also supporting the council and our objectives. We would like to, it's something we really would like to roll out, but you can recognise that the difficulty is around getting enough properties that fall within the rateable value to generate enough income in order to actually operate a bid and the operational costs around that. There's been some funding put forward for Bowness that we're exploring at the moment, but it is something that we're looking at for the other towns as well.
And there was also the sort of health warning of perhaps right at this moment in time asking businesses to put their hand in their pocket might not go down well, or it might be very challenging, but it's not to say that that's not something that we could do as things improve going forward. But it's not been ruled out, but it may not be just at this moment in time the right time to do it. But you know, if we can sell the benefits of the bid concept and develop that further, there's potential there for the other district centres to take up that. Okay, as there's no other questions and everybody's in agreement, we're happy to agree the report.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 9, and it's a review of the taxi fare scales and other charges. And I think that's with Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And this report advises members of the outcome of the review of taxi fare scales and other charges. The Council has a duty to carry out such a review periodically, and in particular to consult with taxi operators and organisations representative of them. So the outcome of the review, which takes into account the costs which taxi operators and drivers have to bear, and also the views of the operators, is the proposal that the fare tariff remains unchanged. And that takes into account the costs which the trade is facing, but it also takes very close account of the views of the Taxi Forum, which suggested that the unchanged position be proposed, and also a wider consultation of operators which took place following on from that. The views in the wider consultation were more balanced, but still on balance in favour of the unchanged tariff, and the views are set out in Appendix 3 of the report. It's, I think, a proposal and a recommendation which is made on balance to the executive. I think everyone would recognise that the trade has suffered significantly from the impact of COVID. I think it's one of the areas of the economy most badly hit due to the very reduced demand for taxi services. But I think the other factor that I've borne in account and taking account of what's said in the consultation responses is that there is a danger, I think, if there were to be any substantial increase in the tariff, that it may have the effect of depressing or dampening any demand that there may be beginning to recover for services for taxis. So, you know, the recommendations are in paragraph 2 of the report, and that is to agree that the unchanged tariff go for wider public consultation. If there are responses, the report will come back, but if not, then the unchanged tariff will be implemented. And I should also note that the portfolio holder, Councillor Murtagh, is on the call and may have further comments to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. I'll go to Councillor Murtagh for some brief comments before I open it up.
Indeed, Convener, thank you. I know it's been a long meeting. I don't propose to keep you too long. I'm sure you're all glad I'm not on the committee for the permanent, given we've had the climate emergency discussed this morning. I think it is, as Colin says, a very much on balance recommendation, and I would echo the comments made about the impact on the trade. And I think that we've been very acutely aware that all businesses have suffered across the board. You know, taxis naturally, while they continue to operate and be very important key services in transporting our key workers, you know, whatever sector is hit in our leisure or tourism or shopping, there is an impact on them. And I think that the on balance recommendation is very much that, you know, it's very difficult to tell what will be the permanent change in habits, as well as we come into this period of recovery. We are starting to see opening up, and for that reason, I think the on balance and pragmatic view is no change. But I would like to just note very quickly that it has been important to widen out consultation, you know, prior to it coming to this committee, and it will go now to public consultation. But there have been significant efforts over the period of the pandemic in the last year by officers and indeed the trade themselves to have more dialogue and discussion. I very much tried to make sure that we're not just focusing on the forum, and also going out to, you know, wider consultation with operators. And now that we've got them on email, we can do that. So you'll see the responses, they're in the appendices, and very much some of the additional comments will be picked up in other work streams as well. So I don't want to go into them now, but I just want to highlight how hard officers have worked to increase engagement with operators overall and through the taxi forum. So I'm happy to add my, you know, my comments that I also think on balance that I know change is the best option. If there's any questions, I'm happy to pick them up also. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Convener. I obviously would like to formally propose this report to committee. And in asking committee to agree to the recommendations as set out in paragraph 2.1, the report highlights that consultation was carried out with operators of taxis, both taxi and private car operators. This consultation was carried out by email. Over 200 operators were contacted. Responses are recorded in Appendix 3. Also, due regard was taken of the Scottish Development Department Circular 25/1986 as set out in paragraph 3.7. Appendix 2 sets out the cost of a 2-mile taxi fare for Scottish local authorities as at May 2021. Falkirk is placed 22nd out of 32 local authorities. And for me, the situation is best summed up by the view of an individual taxi operator as set out within Appendix 3, page 115, in that the operator says, with the current issues with COVID, a rise would only further alienate what little work there is. I think that this view is reflective of the taxi forum and the wider trade. The key factors which have influenced the decision not to increase the current tariff are the unique circumstances of the pandemic and the resulting impact on the demand for taxis and private hire cars. Paragraph 6.4 also draws to our attention the risk in raising the tariff, emerging demand for taxis could be depressed by the increase. In summary, I would just ask that the committee would agree to the recommendations as set out in 2.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Gardner.
Happy to second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gardner. I'll open it up for any comments or questions. Are we happy to agree?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you,
Agreed.
colleagues. Moving on to the resource and finance section of our agenda, and we have the provisional financial outturn for 2020-21, and I'll go to Mr. Smale.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon. This is the first of 2 reports dealing with the 2021 outturn, with both subject to the audit that's now underway. I'll look to provide a brief overview before drawing out some specific points of particular interest. So the report captures the financial turbulence last financial year, and not least in the final weeks of the year, and picks up that thread through into the current financial year, where there's a short section at the end of the report. I think it's also worth noting the scale of the business grants, some 40 million, that were promptly dispersed to the business community during the year. Of particular interest, I think, is the late surge in Scottish Government grant in the latter part of the financial year, which somewhat changes the position from that prevailed on budget day. And with the flow of extra grant, we now have the capacity to substitute that grant for the planned harnessing of the fiscal flexibilities, and furthermore, not needing to harness the planned use of reserves as was anticipated in that budget report. The position will be monitored as we go through the financial year, and we can refine and finesse that position as need be, but that's how it's looking as things sit at the moment. So the reserve balance now sits at a healthy, I would suggest, 9.8 million carried forward into the current financial year. And there is a table at para 341 in the report that sets out the various factors that led to that concluding position. In terms of specific service budgetary positions, there's perhaps just two services that are of a scale that I think merit drawing out. The first is children's at 2.3 million over budget. And in particular, I think it's worth noting that that relates essentially entirely to the social services side of the service rather than the larger education part. And development services at 3.4 million over, and that relates primarily to waste collection, and members will be well aware of the backcloth to that, and also the position with respect to roads. Another element in the mix is the extent to which planned budget savings were not delivered because of the impact of COVID. And the position at outturn essentially is what was previously reported to members. So there's no substantive movement on that front. With respect to the HRA, that's come in below budget by about 2.7 million, which is a relatively small movement of about $500,000 from the previously reported position in January. And the balance will be added to the HRA specific reserve and be carried forward into the current financial year. Just turning briefly and concluding the report to the current financial year, just a couple of points to make. One is self-evidently, we're still in the first quarter of the financial year, so it's still very early days, but there's still uncertainty prevailing, casting one eye forward. And the second point is one specific example of that relating to the pay award. We have a reference point of the 4% awarded to NHS, and were that to be mirrored for local government, that would create financial pressure relative to what we have built into the budget. So that's still the subject of national negotiations with the trade unions. So as of yet is unresolved, as is the related question of, depending on where that finally settles, to what degree, if any, the Scottish Government may offer additional financial support to help finance that pay award. So if we just return to the recommendations at the front end of the report, there's 3 elements there that the committee is invited to note. I'll stop there, convener, and seek to address, along with service colleagues, any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and I'm feeling quite comforted that as we reach the financial outturn, that we are in a much more positive position than we'd originally anticipated, notwithstanding that there is a lot of uncertainties out there. And you've mentioned the pay award as being one of those. We also don't really know the full impact of the pandemic. That's not being realised as yet, and it may be some time before we fully see the impacts of that. And what we don't know is whether or not there's likely to be a further surge of COVID around winter time as we come into that particular period. So while things look much more positive at this moment as we go forward, and the potential to not have to use the fiscal flexibilities, there has to be just a bit of caution, I think, in and around our budget, and keep on the steady course as best we can around our potential savings plans, and just to try and maintain that stability going forward. I think we are going to obviously continue to have discussions with government around next year's budget, and the fiscal flexibilities and bottoming out, particularly of the PPP, PFI loans, is still have to be done, but I think we're in a much more positive position around that than what we were, in getting an acceptance of government on that, and that could be helpful to us in going forward and planning for the future. But that's still obviously still to be worked through. But I think we are in a reasonably stable position. We just need to be cautious as we go forward. And I just thank everybody for the work that's gone on through the last year. As you've said, 40 million in business grants being pushed out to support the local community. Without that, there would have been a further impact on the council as well. So it's good that we were able to do that at such a level and at such speed. But we are in a position now where we just need to keep the ship steadied. Okay, I'm happy to therefore move the recommendations in the report, and we'll go to Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, convener. As has been said, on the positive side, there's an increase in our reserves of £280,000, and it's welcomed with it raising to 9.822 million. That gives us a nice central area between the floor and the top range, slightly to the closer to the top side, which is always something that's positive. I also welcome the carry forward to the £14 million of the COVID funding. Although I think, as most of us will have said in the last year and a half, I think we just got to hope that it's going to be sufficient to take us forward, because I don't think any of us can prejudge what's going to happen over the coming months. And it's good to have it there, and rather than having to hope and wait for it to come later. Again, I welcome the continuing, excuse me, again, I welcome the continuing fiscal flexibilities for this year, and eagerly look forward to the outcome of the third section of fiscal flexibilities, which hopefully will be in the earlier part of the second half of the year. We'll start to hear about that. I also agree there are an amount of uncertainties, and as ever, good financial management will be crucial going forward. Can I thank Brian and his team for this report, and in particular a point in Appendix 2, which is headed off COVID Scottish Government funding, which is a very clear but high level overview of the funding received and how it was applied. I think it's good to get that kind of clear, concise detail on it. So therefore, I'm very happy to second the Leader of the Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, I'll open it up for any questions or comments. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to thank Mr Smale and Mr Kearney for this report. And certainly it's a detailed report. And I'd just like to ask Mr Smale if the budget gap is 17 million predicted for next year. So the position we're in at the moment is looking good. We don't know what's going to happen, of course. So many unknowns, but at this minute in time, might the budget gap be less for next year? So that's one question. And also, Council of the Future projects, are they going to be brought forward? The savings that are made or predicted, are they going to be brought forward for a decision so we don't end up with a salami slicing at the end of the year? So it reduces the gap, but we're making decisions throughout the year. And just on page 125, 3.62, the pay award, certainly the coastal leaders, labour leaders meetings that I attend, there's been discussion about trying to push the Scottish Government, if that's the right word, to fund any gap that might arise should there be a 4% for the public sector. And I would just ask that the Leader of the Council, who gets a vote on behalf of the Council, keeps that pressure on. And if indeed that 4% is agreed across the public sector, that she pushes as hard as she can to encourage the Scottish Government to give us that funding. That's all I've got to say, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. I will answer your last question first, and then I'll pass the other two over to Brian and Stuart, respectively. Certainly, that there has been discussions through COSLA leaders, and as an SNP group, we have been supportive of approaching the government to have further discussions around a pay deal, and it's been very clear that without additional funding, the 4% would not be affordable for local authorities, and we will continue to ask for support from government if that is what the outcome is, as clearly as has been said from our budget proposals here, that 3.9 million on a recurring basis is something that is very difficult to sustain within the current budget without impacting on services or budgets. So, Mr Smale, do you want to talk about the budget gaps for future years?
Thank you, Convener. The only thing I can say with certainty in the budget gap is that it won't be what we're showing it is at the moment. It will move. Whether it moves north or south will be dependent on what happens during the course of the year. And just linking with the third point you made on pay, if the pay award proves to be of a level matching the NHS, that will increase our base budget into next year. So that of itself will take the gap, will increase the gap. But there are so many other factors at play as well. So we constantly look to update the gap as more intelligence emerges during the course of the year. But as you'll have heard me say before, albeit there's lots of variables, an awful lot of variables that feeds into that single figure, there are two that dwarf everything else. On the revenue side, it's the level of grant, and on the expenditure side, it's the level of pay. So there's nothing particularly at the moment that would cause us at this stage to revise the assumptions on the gap. But as I say, as the year progresses and information crystallises, we'll refine that and we'll have a clearer picture, albeit incomplete, as we move closer to the actual time of settling the budget. I think, Convener, from what you're saying, you were perhaps wanting Mr Ritchie to pick up on the Council of the Future project question.
Yeah. Stuart, you want to say about the programme of the projects coming forward to front of members for decision?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. So Councillor Bissett's correct in what he says. The intention is to bring a series of reports before members after the recess. So that's probably reports over September, October and November, dealing with each of our priority Council of Future projects, and that'll set out for members service delivery benefits arising from these projects, but also the savings that arise from them as well. Again, Councillor Bissett's correct that when members agree the project and the savings, then these savings will be deducted from the opening budget balance, budget gap that there is for future years.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Okay, is there any other member? Are we happy to agree? Oh, sorry, Councillor Reid. Pat,
You're
you're
on
still
mute.
on mute.
That's the best time to hear me when I'm on mute. Yes, it's just a question on the housing revenue account, Convener. Where there's a reduction in the repair work of about 7.5 million. That's not through anybody's fault, I hasten to add. But when is it foreseen that that work will be caught up with? It's also reflected in the Housing Capital Fund, isn't it? In the next item. That's a hell of a lot of work to catch up on. And how do we foresee accomplishing that, assuming the pandemic ends relatively soon?
I think there has been some actions put in place to look at progressing that, but I'll ask Mr. Ritchie to give a bit more detail.
Yeah, thanks again, Convener. So there's a programme being put in place to identify some additional resources to start to tackle backlogs in some key areas. We issued some correspondence to our building maintenance employees last week before last, just to make them aware of that, and gave a copy of that correspondence to group leaders. We can give a copy of that to all members if that would be helpful. So it's looking in particular at backlogs in the revenue account on voids, on kitchens, on aids and adaptations. And as the convener says, these are just backlogs that have arisen as a result of the restrictions brought about by COVID. But as we're now able to get in to do more work, it's just about trying to find the trades resources to be able to do that work. So we're currently in the process of looking to procure additional resources. That'll take a few weeks before we can get those resources on board. So we're probably going to talk about later on in the summer, before we actually see some additional boots on the ground to get into tackle the backlog that's there. And we'll just give updates to elected members in the usual way through the kind of bi-monthly finance reports that Brian brings to members on where we are in tackling the backlogs.
It's certainly a mighty task that lies ahead. I've been talking to people who are in the building trade privately, and they just can't seem to get the men and women for that matter. So good luck to all concerned.
Yeah, I think that manpower is a shortage, particularly as those that were perhaps from Europe have returned or chosen to work elsewhere as a result of leaving the EU. And I think we're starting to see that impact now going forward. Okay. Councillor Harris, did you want to come in? No, okay. Councillor Kerr.
I'll just be quick, Convener. I said that I don't know if it was this meeting or the last executive, but materials is a massive problem for full trade. It doesn't matter what supplier you go to, everybody is struggling. So Pat, probably right, it's going to be a very hard task to catch up. But we welcome the report, and Brian and his team are all diligent in their findings. So just like to thank Brian and the team for that. And I'm sure Stuart and his team will get there through time, but it will be a long slog. But we need to get these houses back in operation so we can get people into them. But thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cairn. I think the fact that we do have a plan in place recognises that there is that need there, and they're working to be able to implement that as best and as quickly as possible. Okay, if there's no other member, we're happy to agree the report.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the capital programme outturn, and back to Brian.
Thanks, Convener. So the essence of this report is, as has already been recognised, significant underspends in both programmes, and worth noting that's a position that will be mirrored by all councils across the land. So consequently, the slippage along with the matching resources will be carried forward into the current financial year. Inevitably, there's an impact on resources used, particularly borrowing, but as I say, those resources will be carried forward. And just to make the point, as Councillor Kerr has already done, we are starting to see real cost pressures coming through in materials, as well as evidently staff resource issues. In terms of maybe some specifics, just very briefly on the report, on the General Services Capital Programme, Para 411 shows the areas essentially positive where investment has actually taken place during the year. But the following paragraph notes the significant underspend of some 19 million. And very similarly for the HRA, 431 shows where investment has actually taken place, but the following paragraph balances that with the significant underspend of 48 million to be carried forward. And the tail end of the report, section 5, just summarises the position on capital reserves. And again, the recommendations you'll see at the front of the report. And I'm mindful of comments made earlier in the agenda under the environmental report, where members raise some issues which they may wish to bring into play with this item. So I'll stop there, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm aware of time and people will be getting hungry, so I'll be very, very brief in relation to this report, because I think it probably speaks for itself, and we've already had some of the discussion previously around the challenges. We recognise there has been significant slippage, and we understand the reasons for that. And as a local authority, we're not an outlier in that. Everyone else is experiencing similar difficulties, and getting their capital programmes back on track is challenging, just because of the issues around workforce and the supply of materials. Everybody recognises that capital projects can play a key role in our recovery programme, and are looking to progress those as quickly as they can in order to help stimulate the economy. However, we are kind of thwarted by other aspects, but we do just have to work through that and look at ways around that as best we can. So with that understanding of where we are, I'm happy to move the recommendations as per the report. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. To be honest with you, between the last item and this one, Moses have stole just about everything I said. I don't know if I sent it round publicly, because I'd covered an awful lot about material shortages. But to be honest with you, this report, I mean, significant slippage in this report is the least surprising outcome of any report that's come before this committee in my time that we've been on here. I think we understand there was a shutdown, and that's ended up with significant backlogs. And that's me divert from what I was going to say. Can I say thank you to Stuart, the fact that they're taking actions to get resources, because resources, I think, will potentially become a big part of the problem. The material cost rises, I think, will be short term. I think once the materials start flowing better into the UK as a whole, I think we'll get in a situation that competitive tender will hopefully return them somewhere to what we would call the normal price. Yeah, the leader did touch on the skilled labour that's going back to Europe. They're not all going back to the countries they came from. They're going to work in other countries. Germany's became the most popular place for a lot of the skilled trades people we had here who are going back there to work. However, on a positive side, I've noticed, and because as you know, I work also in the construction industry, I've noticed an amount of apprentices getting employed has increased quite dramatically amongst a number of firms, and that can only be something that's going to be positive. I think the apprenticeship system is something that was underrated. Yeah, it was underrated by people, and they kept trying to change it. There was nothing wrong with apprenticeship. As one myself, I know that it taught you very well. So with that, as I say, I'll also do you all the favour of keeping it very short, and I'll formally second the leader of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Stuart, do you want to maybe just address Councillor Bissett's question from the previous report around the environmental impacts, and particularly around the renewable of heating systems with new sustainable heating systems?
Yeah, thanks. Happy to do that, and I think that it's largely been covered already. So the reason that we underspent by about £9 million last year was just the direct result of COVID and just an inability to get in to be able to do work for large periods of time. So the challenge for us is to try and catch up on that work, but the challenge for us is to try and catch up in that work within the environment that everybody's just been talking about of restrictions in skilled labour, but also potential early price increases as well. So again, I think the way to keep members updated on this is going to be through the bi-monthly reports that Brian brings to elected members, but members should be assured that we are doing the best that we can along with colleagues in development services.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks for that answer. And just a quick question. I know there's been a move to use external contractors to assist with maintenance. Certainly, we're opposed to any sort of form of privatisation, and it's just a concern if we're using private contractors a lot, that employees might see this as a move down that line. So I'm just looking for an assurance that the use of external contractors to help with voids and other maintenance issues is purely temporary during this pandemic. Thank you.
Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. We made that important point when we wrote out to our employees, just to try and set out for them the environment within which we are operating. So we have said that the use of additional labour is temporary to try and get us over this problem of backlog. The issue of backlog is not new to the trade unions or the building maintenance employees. Have been kept up to date with that over the course of the last year or so. We spoke about apprentices on the call. Councillor Bowes mentioned apprentices. And one of the things that we have said in our letter to building maintenance employees is that we're looking to try and recruit another 6 apprentices ourselves. So we've made that commitment to our employees that the use of external resources short term, we're looking to try and grow our own employees ourselves, and we just need to try and get over a bit of a hump that we've got with the backlogs and get our housing maintenance programme back online.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? Any questions or comments? Are we happy to agree with the report?
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you. We come to our final item on today's agenda, and that is land surplus to requirements, 64 Simpson Drive, Madison. And is that with yourself, Douglas? Yeah.
Thanks, convener. Fairly straightforward report. It's a request to acquire a piece of ground at, as you say, 64 Simpson Drive in Madison. It's surplus to our operational requirements, and therefore we're agreeable to declaring it surplus and disposing it to the adjacent owner. It is currently utilised through an agreement we have with them as a part of the garden ground. This makes that arrangement formal. We've checked it off with the district valuer to get a suitable price that's noted at £5,000, and the owner has secured planning permission for the change of use to private garden ground, so we suggest that we proceed. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. Is there any questions or comments from members? Okay, I'm happy to move. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kerr.
I was waiting on Councillor Hughes coming in since he was another local member, but I'll formally propose that we accept that proposal, convener. The resident who looks after it very well. It's just a part of their, through the years it became part of their garden, and they've maintained it really well. So I'll formally propose it.
Okay, thank you for that. And Councillor Alexander.
I was just going to say, convener, I didn't want to jump in, but since Councillor Kerr has formally proposed, I'll be happy to second his motion in the interests of collaboration and basically mutual respect for each other.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I'm not quite sure what to say there, but okay, is there any other comments or questions in relation to this item? We're happy to agree.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed with some of it.
Okay, thank you. It's good to see some collaborative working and unanimity, but I think we've had a good meeting this morning in all respects. There's been some good discussions, had some searching questions, as there should be, and I thank everybody for their attendance today. And I think we can maybe let folks go now, be able to cup of tea and a sandwich, and whatever you have on this afternoon. But thanks very much for your time this morning.